Hey guys, it's Ethan from Zimmer Labs, and this is Cameron's Masterpiece Raven Neopixel Proffieboard lightsaber that I just finished up, made from an Ultrasabers hilt. It is, as you can see, has a custom finish. It is worn and weathered, battle scarred, battle worn, with a really kick-ass crystal reveal right built into the hilt itself. And I will take you guys through it in just a second and show you how it works. But it's pretty cool. I'm pretty happy with this. The one thing that I like a lot about this hilt that isn't something probably that was intended, I really enjoy that you can easily take off a couple of these claws. Each claw is attached by just one retention screw and then a steel peg to give it stability. Personally, I really like it like this with just the one claw. But it's cool because you get the option with this hilt of how you want to configure it. One claw, two claws, three claws, no claws, whatever seems best. But it's just one little thing about this hilt that I personally really like a lot. And it's something that you don't see in other hilt designs. I mean, there's very few other lightsaber hilt designs out there that have any claws. There's the dual. It's pretty badass too. It's like almost like a meat fork. You could grill with this thing. Just be like, steak's done. Let me flip it over. All right, so we're back to three claws. Before we dive in, let me show you guys what it looked like to begin with. When I first got it, that's what it looked like. Totally unweathered, super duper shiny, just black and silver. As I said, it's Ultrasaber, so the finish on it wasn't the best. I mean, it's not bad at all. Ultrasabers has a very consistent product, and their finish is very consistent. But that being said, like the small little silver rings here, grips, or whatever you want to call them, the edges right around here where the silver meets the black up near the emitter, these are all incredibly sharp when you first get it. Before you have a chance to weather, sand, polish, or refinish it. And they are so sharp that it's not out of the realm of possibility that you would slice your hand open just by picking it up, and if you twisted it in your hand like that, you might slice your hand on these ridges. So those of you guys who are picking up a brand spanking new, shiny new Ultrasaber, be careful to just make sure that none of the edges, like this edge right here, was incredibly sharp. So something to keep in mind. When I did this guy, I did the build first, and I did the weathering at the end because I really wasn't sure how I wanted to do the weathering, how far I wanted to go with it, what techniques I wanted to use with it, subtractive versus additive. But in the end, rather than I was considering doing some stone washing and some metal washing and some acids, but in the end I decided to just be subtractive about it and kind of just beat it up on the wheel a little bit. I gave it a little bit of a cutout chasm groove thing going on here, and then steel wool wire wheels, and then put it on the polishing wheel and just shined it up at the end, and that gives it the nice worn in feel with smoothed edges. There's no more sharp edges on this guy anywhere. And there is a whole lot of shininess that wasn't there, especially in areas down here where you would be holding on to it in real life using it. That's the place where it is most worn and most shiny and rounded. So the idea was to kind of try to make it as real as possible as far as the weathering goes, but that's the best part of the weathering, in my opinion, is the different tones going on here. Like in the very middle of this groove here, it's extremely shiny and polished, whereas the edge of that area is shiny but not polished. It's a matte finish, and then it fades into the black, which is, you know, it gives the whole thing some contrast and some relief. It's not just like shiny versus black. It's got gradients and levels of different colors and shades and shines and finishes to really make it pop and to really make it look a bit more realistic, a bit more vintage, a bit more actually battle worn and used. And then there are just a couple of random nicks and imperfections that I wanted to put into it to make it look real. Like down here on this claw, it's got a bit more wear than elsewhere, just because, you know, that's something that happened in a battle. And then, you know, right here, I give it a nice little nick. As I said, right here, it's solid nick. Then there is also one main scratch line that runs all the way down from the top of the emitter through the entire thing and into the pommel down here, which was probably where, I don't know, Reven got thrown off a balcony and this thing went down a cliff or something. Then also right in front of the base of the crystal reveal, there's a good worn out kind of imperfection chunk here. Nothing crazy, nothing totally off the wall, like no big cracks or gouges. That's the other thing I was considering doing. We opted for, Cameron wanted a rounded cutout for the crystal reveal. I was considering doing like a jagged crack slash hole where a big chunk was ripped out or blown out for the crystal reveal. But Cameron decided he wanted to do a rounded look, and I'm definitely very happy with the way the rounded hole came out. It's a nice, even, centered cutout, and it's just the right size to really get a good crystal reveal, while at the same time not detracting from the stability of the hilt, or the look of the hilt, really. Let's see. So to turn it on, I wanted to make this guy as easy as possible, as efficient and usable as possible, so I did a little cutout here for the main activation switch, which is almost, you know, if you don't know it's there, you're not going to notice it, but right there you'll see the kill switch. And if you have long nails, you could probably do it, but otherwise just tweezers or a screwdriver or something to turn it on and off. Then crystal is immediately active. Custom blade plug. As you can see, that's running Neopixels. It is a turbine with a brass bullet tip in there, and retention screws are on the side. There are two. You don't have to use both, but you might as well because it gives you a bit more stability. Blade plug. Just made using two different sizes of blade tube, 7/8 and 1 inch, compacted together, glued together, and then independently diffused with sandpaper to give it a bit more shine through, and then also some diffusing foam at the very top to give it some more shine, and then your turbine, your standard turbine razor blade style plug up here. That slides into the emitter, and hopefully you guys can see it slides down to it's a stock Custom Works Neopixel pogo pin style blade connector with a custom housing and a custom diffused polycarbonate screen on it. And this guy just slides in there. You can set it about an inch deep if you like. Looks good that way, but I personally think it looks a little bit better when the blade plug is almost all the way up. So I like to put it about there and then tighten the set screws. And like I said, you only need one set screw. You don't have to use them both, but if you got the blade in there, you might as well use both to give it extra blade stability. The buttons, it's got 2-button system, main, power, and then auxiliary. What I did for the button setup is, initially this had the standard 15 or 14 millimeter round cutout right here for a press fit momentary button that all Ultrasabers hilts have. But this is where I wanted to put the crystal chamber cutout, so I cut that area away, and that meant that the switch hole was removed, which also meant that I could then do whatever I wanted for switches. And rather than have a big honking round standard ugly ass 15 millimeter switch, I decided to go for something a bit more unique and custom. So what I did was a magnetic removable steel horseshoe pin that fits in and connects up to the switches that are chassis mounted here. If you push on the bottom, that's the main button. If you push on the top, that's the auxiliary. And then when you want to remove the chassis, you just simply pull this off, unscrew the bottom, and it slides right out. The beauty of it is this is just a very simple horseshoe shaped, probably 2.5 millimeter wide steel rod. So you can replace that simply. You can make different versions. Maybe you want to have it flat, maybe you want to have it knurled, or maybe you want to make it out of a different color, you want to make it brass. All of those things are easily doable just because it's such a simple mechanism. And it also, because it's steel, it's extremely strong, and the strength of the steel helps to lock the chassis in place, because when you pull this out, the chassis is a bit more free to move inside the hilt, but when you put this guy in, it really locks the chassis in further. The chassis is locked in place already by the pommel and then the blade going in and the compression effect of the two. But this is just a bit added more stability to, be more stable. Alright, so inside, as I was saying, you just slide off or unscrew the pommel. Then there's a spacer. Then you want to pull the switch mechanism. Then you can simply take a thumb and press on the crystal reveal there to kind of get it started, and the chassis slides right out. This is the entirety of the chassis and electronics. There's nothing left in there now except for the blade plug, which is cool because that means everything's self-contained. The chassis I did is a masterpiece level build with crystal chamber, but also a cross between a standard masterpiece build and a Titan class. What I wanted to do was, because it's an Ultrasaber, that means it's a big hilt. They don't make anything that's a small hilt. And that's not always great, in my opinion. I like stuff to be a bit smaller than this usually, but the good part about that is that means you can go big with a lot of things. You can go big with the speaker. You can go big with the battery. You can go big with your ambition. So for this guy, I wanted to kind of do a Titan class because I had the ability to go big, and that's what the Titan classes are all about. So I did a 31mm premium bass speaker right in the bottom. And then I did a 2700 removable battery. And like the other Titan classes I've done in the past, it's essentially a two-piece chassis. There are two main threaded rods, one here, and there are 2 bolts. And they are easily finger twisted to remove. And you just kind of alternate and go back and forth on each side until they're off. And then, you know, take the little rounded bolts off and put them away somewhere, and then you can slide to separate the entire chassis into the 2 pieces. It's constituent halves, if you will. The setup is accomplished by using an array of pin headers on both sides that mate when you put the 2 together, and the pin headers then connect up to make everything connected and work. But when you slide them apart, everything obviously disconnects, and so nothing is live anymore, which is good because that means then you don't have to worry about, you know, sliding out the battery and having, you know, contacts, like loose connections or anything, cross feeding or zapping or whatever. But the idea here was to make this as big and loud and in your face as possible. So swappable battery, like I said, 2700. This is a Sanyo 2700. It is a 4000 milliamp 30 amp battery. It is, I can't remember what the actual model number on it is, but I'll try to put that in the comments maybe. But it's a Sanyo. It's a really good battery. It's super powerful, super long life. Inside there is a really heavy duty spring for the negative contact down at the bottom. And as you can see, this guy slides down in there. And now it's very spring loaded. On the other end, the positive contact is on the other side of the chassis, and that's also a spring loaded contact. So when the 2 are put together, that means the battery is under really a lot of pressure to the contacts, which means you don't have to worry about it ever having a loose connection. I mean, that battery is just totally locked in place once the 2 halves are assembled and the nuts are locked in. Up top, the top half, there is a door section here with some geometric metal mesh that you can pop off if you want to access the Proffieboard. But you don't have to take this off to access it. You can access it just by going on the bottom side here. And hopefully you guys can see that the USB port is right there and the SD card is right there. So that means if you want to connect it up to your computer, you can simply take a USB cable and connect it right up to this guy, and then you can plug just this top half into your computer, run Arduino, change your config, upload a new config, upload your new software, whatever you want to do. Super easy access right there, and the SD card slides out straight this way, so it's really easy to grab too. But if you want to, like if you need to access the reset button or whatever else you might need to access on the Proffieboard, it is right there. You just pop this door off and it pops back on. There are 2 steel rods that run here and here that the cover snaps onto. Let's put this guy back together right quick. Now, putting it back together is not really tricky, but it takes a tiny bit of getting used to the first time. You just have to kind of, once you get these bolts started, it's simple. But getting them started is kind of tricky the first time you do it. A little bit of practice and it's like nothing, but once you get them started, then you just basically alternate until the two halves are tightened back up. Once the two halves are pushed all the way back together and the two bolts are screwed as tight as they're going to be, you're all set. That's totally good to go again. Down at the bottom, that's where your main power switch is. We've got Neopixel accents going on in here. It is a Xylon effect behind this custom printed faux metal section, if you will. It's got a really cool Xylon effect that is a ramp up to a fire effect, I think. And then a ramp back down to white, which obviously can be changed, and whatever you want can be put in there. But this was what I kind of felt was the best. And I think for all the blades it's the same effect. I think I kind of settled on. Yeah, the only difference is the final color that it ramps up to is going to mimic whatever the blade color is. So this guy looks like a dark orange or an orange red. So that's what this ramps up to, is orange red, to match the blade connector, the crystal chamber, and the blade. So this one should ramp up to a fire blade effect. Yeah, there you go. This is my personal favorite. I think that just looks so good. How it's just basically pouring fire through this little small grate area in the bottom. Looks like there's actually fire inside the bottom of this chassis. Super fantastic illuminated crystal. Super fantastically diffused and illuminated blade connector. Let's see, obviously there's a whole bunch of other metal elements going on around here, all throughout. Basically anywhere I could squeeze metal in, I put it in. Recharge port is hanging out down at the bottom. It's a 1.3mm high amp recharge port, and this is a super high amp kill switch, which is a really nice one. It's really nice to have these nowadays, because back in the day the old switches that we used to use were just so cheesy and flimsy that they basically broke like at least once a year. These things are so much better. You can feel it just by clicking. I mean, they're just so obviously better made, and they don't break. Or at least, not nearly as much. Crystal chamber is done in brass and polished stainless steel. Basically, the internal section is all brass. And then the external section is all stainless steel. The blade connector is a custom polished aluminum housing. These are extra long length Neopixel pins, or Pogo Pixel pins, I'm sorry. And the backside is where the switches, the chassis based switches, are hidden. What I did was I put two rounded cutouts right into this area. There you go, you can see them perfect there. And then I mounted little tiny N52 1mm by 3mm magnets right to the switches there, and that's what holds the switch mechanism on. So when you slide this guy up into the hilt, there are two corresponding holes, and when you see the two little round shiny magnets in the holes, then you know you're all lined up, and then you can pop the horseshoe shaped switch assembly in and you're good to go. So I just put the blade in, tighten these two set screws, and go ahead and turn it back on. Power and auxiliary is this bar switch. So the bottom side is power, top side is auxiliary. And if you push right in the middle, it gets both buttons, and that's what does color wheel. But it takes a little practice. Yeah, it does take a little bit of practice to get it just right, but it's pretty easy, pretty straightforward. So let's jump back to the beginning, and I'll run through the blade presets. So first one is really an aggressive sound font. It's called Apex. And magenta blade, a nice slow retraction. Another really aggressive, throaty sound font. Next up, we've got a dark orange. Next up is a audio flicker that is red and light pink, I think. This is a white-yellow audio flicker. Traditional fire blade. It's the electricity blade. This is a turbine blade. And then the last blade is a POV blade. And then we're back to the beginning with the bright red. Crystal chamber obviously mimics whatever the blade is doing. And that's it for the blade presets. And the one other thing that I wanted to show you guys is one of the other switch options. It's like I was saying, this is a pretty much universal switch setup. So I also did independent switches that are just little black plungers. No, I guess I'm gonna have to trim that one down a little bit. But so the other setup is like this. You don't have to have that bar. You can. So whatever camera, whatever feels more comfortable to you, whatever's easier for you. I think I'll probably trim these down so that they don't stick up quite this much. And then the other thing that I wanted to do with this that seemed like a good idea to me was, since this is an Ultrasaber, it is really a uniform hilt. And what I mean by that is that pretty much every Ultrasaber's hilt, for the most part, is going to have the same internal measurements as this guy. Some may be longer, some may be shorter, but they're all right around the same length and the same internal measurements. So because I made this a totally self-contained hilt with buttons on the chassis, you could in theory go out and order 2 or 3 more other Ultrasabers hilts that were roughly the same shape, as long as they have the same internal diameter and are roughly as long. You can just put a couple holes in right here and a hole for your kill switch, and you can put this chassis into another hilt and have another lightsaber. So this is a pretty universal setup. Oh, where is the little door? I forgot to put back on. Can't lose this. Here's the Proffieboard for you guys to see. There we go. Now the door snaps back on. I'll show you guys the fire effect that's on here. This looks really good. And this one's a cyan and white fire to match with the electricity blade. It's so bright, it's ridiculous. You could use this as a torch if you wanted to. If you went outside. Like, oh, hey Fido, where'd you go, buddy? And those are the 2 switches. As I mentioned before, they're just 2 N52 magnets. Crystal chamber. Plenty bright. A pretty big crystal too. This is about the biggest crystal that I could possibly fit into this guy. Sometimes it's better, you're better off going with a little bit smaller crystal, but it's such a big hilt, such a big lightsaber, big sound, big battery. I figured big crystal is probably perfect. And I think it came out really nice. I think the proportions are good. It's not too big at all. Right, so yeah, so there's the blades. Other than that, I'm going to give it just a final tune-up on the SD card, make sure the sound fonts are all perfect, and run through the config file one last time to make sure that my blades are programmed just exactly the way I want them to be. No spare code or anything hidden in there. And other than that, this guy is ready to go out. So Cameron, let me know what you think. If you are happy with the finished product, then I'll get it packed up and put it in the mail to you ASAP. Should probably get it to you by the end of the week. Thank you guys, as always, for watching. And stay tuned. Got a couple more coming at you very, very quickly.